My husband told me I was too sensitive about his mother's comments, and 3 months after I stopped defending myself, he finally understood what she'd been saying. Throwaway, because my husband knows my main, and this is the kind of thing that deserves its own account, its own breath, its own space to exist outside the life I've been living. If you know me in real life and you are reading this, please let me have this. Please just let me have this. Asterisk. I want to start by telling you about a Sunday in October. It was the kind of Sunday that tricks you. The kind where the light comes through the kitchen window at a particular angle, gold and generous and slow, and everything in your house looks like it belongs on a mood board someone made about the life you always wanted. The coffee was good. The blanket on the couch was the soft one that I'd bought at a street market years ago and never replaced, even though the edge has started to fray at one corner. Because the fraying has become familiar, and familiar is its own kind of comfort. Joel was humming something in the shower, some half-remembered song from the 90s, something off-key and private, the kind of sound a person makes when they think nobody is listening and they are exactly as themselves as they ever get. I was sitting at the kitchen table with both hands wrapped around my mug. The apartment was ordinary and warm and quiet in the good way. I thought, asterisk, this is fine. This is actually fine. Maybe I've been wrong about all of it, asterisk. That's the thing about living inside a situation that erodes you slowly. There are these small reprieves, these little pockets of ordinary goodness, and you grab onto them so hard that your knuckles go white. You hold the good Sunday like evidence, like a counter-argument to something you can't stop thinking about. You think, a woman who was truly being harmed wouldn't have mornings like this. And so you file the morning away in the cabinet labeled proof that I am fine, and you go on. You take your coffee to the couch, and you pull the fraying blanket over your legs, and you listen to your husband hum off-key in the shower, and you let yourself believe in the evidence. I went on for 3 years like that. My name is Nadia. I'm 31 years old now, though I started this story at 25 and most of it took place between 27 and 30. I've been married to Joel for 4 years and together with him for 6. I do graphic design, freelance, built slowly over years, a few steady anchor clients, and a handful of relationships. I've grown into something I'm genuinely proud of. Joel works in finance, a position he is well suited for and takes seriously, at a firm downtown that he speaks about with the measured investment of someone who respects what he does without being consumed by it. Joel is, when I am being fully honest and neither generous nor cutting, a fundamentally decent man. A man who is loyal and reasonably self-aware and capable of real tenderness. A man who was raised by a woman who taught him, not through instruction but through the entire architecture of how their family moved through the world, that love and criticism were the same gesture. That paying attention to someone meant a constant low monitoring of their shortcomings. That you could say almost anything to a person as long as your face was open and warm when you said it and your intentions remained, at the core, good. He did not know he'd been taught this. I'm not sure he does entirely even now. But he is learning. His mother's name is Diane. I want to be careful about how I describe Diane because I've spent the better part of 3 years being told I was exaggerating her. I've been told I'm too sensitive. I've been told I misread things. I've been told that she means well, and that's what matters, and that I have to understand she comes from a different generation, and she just has a different way of expressing herself, and she loves me in her own way even if it doesn't always resemble what I'm used to. I have heard every permutation of that sentence until the words lost their meaning and became simply the sound of someone asking me to make myself smaller so that everyone else could be more comfortable. So I'll describe Diane plainly. The way a documentary camera would, without editorializing, without interpretation layered over the footage. I'll tell you what she said. You can decide what you hear. The first time I met Diane, Joel and I had been together for about 4 months. We drove out to his parents' house in Connecticut for a long weekend, Friday through Monday, and I was nervous in the specific way you're nervous when something feels like an audition and nobody will tell you what the part actually requires. I wore a yellow sundress. It was July, I was 25, and I had thought carefully about yellow because yellow seemed like the color of people who were easy to be around. I tried the dress on twice before we left. I wanted to make a good impression. Diane opened the door and looked at me, one long, unhurried pass from my sandals to my face, and said, "Oh, how fun. You're so little, like a little bird. Howard, come look, she's very small." Howard, Joel's father, materialized from somewhere inside the house. He almost always materialized from somewhere inside the house, smiled with genuine, uncomplicated warmth, and said, "Welcome, Nadia. Great to finally meet you." He shook my hand. He meant it. Diane said, "Is yellow your color, do you think? I always find it ages people. But you're young, so it probably doesn't matter." She said it while she was hugging me, one arm around my shoulders, her cheek briefly against mine, the words delivered directly into the side of my neck, as though sharing a confidence. By the time she released me, the smile was fully back in place, and the comment was already technically over, already in the past, already something I would sound unreasonable bringing up later, because what would I say? She told me yellow ages people while she was hugging me. Put it down in writing, and it looks like nothing. Speak it aloud, and it sounds like nothing. It is technically nothing. That's the genius of it, I would come to understand. That was the entire architecture. The message embedded inside the embrace. The critique delivered inside the welcome. The whole thing wrapped so tightly in warmth and good intention that to object to it you would first have to unwrap it, hold up the contents, and explain what you were looking at. And by then the moment had passed, she was 3 comments further along, and you were standing there holding something so small it made you feel stupid for having picked it up at all. I told Joel about it that night, lying in his childhood bedroom with the cross-country trophies on the shelves and the smell of someone else's history in everything. I kept my voice light. I actually laughed a little as I told him. The way you laugh to demonstrate that you are a reasonable person who is not making too much of something. I said, "Your mom made kind of a weird comment about my dress." And Joel, half asleep and fully relaxed in the uncomplicated way he was always relaxed in his parents' house, said, "She's nervous too. She doesn't know what to say with new people. She's kind of awkward at first with strangers. Don't take it personally." I said okay. I turned over and pulled the blanket up and told myself he was right. He knew her better than I did. She was nervous. She would warm up. I believed that. I believed it the way you believe things when you are 25 and newly in love and the world has not yet given you enough evidence to know better. I believed him many times after that. It became its own kind of habit, the believing, a groove in my thinking that got deeper with each pass. Joel is the oldest of 3. Audrey is 2 years younger than him and lives in Portland. Pete is 6 years younger and was, when I entered this story, still living near his parents, still unmarried, still in the comfortable early phase of life before anything has accumulated enough weight to require a reckoning with it. Diane's attention, her fullest, most specific attention, had always lived on Joel. Not because she loved the others less, exactly, but because Joel was her firstborn and she had organized herself around him in a way that had become structural over 30 years. You could see it in every room they were in together. The way her body turned toward him automatically when he spoke, the way her voice changed register, the particular expression her face made when she watched him that it made for no one else. Audrey had developed, sometime in her mid-20s, a kind of serene and self-protective detachment. She called on birthdays. She appeared at Christmas with a pleasant, unruffled expression and the kind of emotional discipline that I recognized immediately as the thing you build after you've processed something fully and decided on your own terms of engagement with it. She lived her Portland life at a comfortable remove, and she was, I think, genuinely happy in it. She told me something important early on. At a family dinner, while Diane was in the kitchen and Pete was on his phone and Howard was refilling everyone's water and Joel was in the bathroom. This small window of privacy. She leaned across the table and said, quietly and precisely, like someone delivering information they've been waiting to pass along. "The thing about my mom is that she really only has full access to you if you let her." A beat. I figured that out around 27. Everything got easier after that. But it took me a really long time to get there. She leaned back. Joel returned from the bathroom. Diane came in from the kitchen with a serving dish. The window closed. I stored that sentence. Filed it in the part of my mind where I kept things I wasn't ready to do anything with yet. It would sit there for 2 more years before I took it back out. Pete was uncomplicated and sweet, and I liked him genuinely. He had the easy warmth of someone who has not yet been assigned a role in the family's difficulties, who has been, by the circumstance of birth order and temperament, allowed to remain simply Pete. He liked video games and basketball, and cooking elaborate weekend breakfasts, and he was loud in the good-natured way of someone who fills rooms without meaning to. I will always love Pete. Howard was largely, in those years, a background presence. A nice man who had developed, over 30-something years of marriage, a kind of pleasant ambient invisibility. He had a workshop in the garage where he built birdhouses, detailed, beautiful things, Victorian cottages and barn replicas and Cape Cods, which he donated to a hospice and a children's hospital. He spent a great deal of time in that workshop. I have thought about Howard carefully over the years of this story. I don't blame him for the particular accommodations he made, but I notice them. I notice what he chose not to see, and I think about the cost of that choosing. I need to tell you about the comments because context is everything, and without it this just reads as a daughter-in-law catalog of grievances, which is an unsympathetic genre for good reason. Everyone has a difficult mother-in-law story, and most of them are about misunderstandings and adjustment periods and different communication styles, and the ordinary friction of families being assembled out of strangers who then have to learn to love each other. I know that genre, and I am not trying to write in it. What I'm trying to describe is something more consistent and more specific. The experience of living inside a pattern so fine-grained and so continuous that the pattern itself became invisible, became the air, became the baseline from which everything was measured. The comments about my appearance were never about my appearance. They were always dressed as something else: health concern, fond observation, warm monitoring. You have such a delicate frame. I always worry about you in winter. Do you get enough iron? She said, touching my arm. This was presented as caring. Joel says you don't eat much, but I always make plenty, so don't worry, she told me, having evidently discussed my eating habits with my husband in a conversation I hadn't been part of and hadn't known about. This was presented as hosting. Once at Thanksgiving, I watched her watch me take a second serving of stuffing. The quality of her attention, precise and particular, the attention of someone taking note, and when I looked up she said brightly, "Good for you. I love seeing a woman who isn't afraid of food. Some women are so anxious about it. It's refreshing, honestly." Said as a compliment. Joel squeezed my knee under the table. I could not tell if he was comforting me or reminding me not to react. The comments about my work came from what I believe was her genuine incomprehension of what graphic design means as a profession. She held it in the mental category of hobby, of creative outlet, of the kind of thing you do because it brings you joy as opposed to because it is your livelihood. "Still doing your little art projects?" she said to me once, in passing, in a kitchen, not even pausing in what she was doing, about a week after I had closed the largest contract of my career to that point, a project I had been quietly proud of, that I had built a relationship toward over 2 years of consistent work. "That's so nice, Nadia. It's so important to have something creative in your life." Joel was standing right there. He said, "Mom, it's her job." A light correction, factual, no particular emphasis. And then the subject moved on. I stood in that kitchen and thought about the email I'd received that week. The client wanting a year renewal with expanded scope. And I thought, little art projects. I thought it all the way home and for a few days after, and I tried to put it down, and I mostly did eventually, in the way I mostly did everything eventually. I put it in the cabinet, and I went on. The comments about our future, about children, specifically, occupied their own category. Diane wanted grandchildren. She wanted them with a completeness and a certainty that had, over the years of my observation, calcified into something that felt less like longing and more like assumption. She did not ask Joel and me directly whether we planned to have children. She didn't need to ask. She simply announced a future she'd already fully furnished. "When you two have kids, we'll need a bigger table," she said at a family dinner, brightly, looking around at the assembled family as though noting a logistical matter. "I always imagined Joel's children with dark hair," she said once, her eyes moving to me. "But you never know how it goes." She said this with a smile and something in the quality of her gaze that made me feel less like a person and more like a variable in an equation she was solving. The most direct comment came on a Christmas evening when we were doing dishes together in the kitchen. Just the two of us. Everyone else dispersed into other parts of the house, the air warm and smell of cinnamon and roast meat and candle wax. She was washing and I was drying. She said, not looking at me, in the calm and conversational tone of someone who had been waiting for the right moment and recognized this as it. "You know, Nadia, the longer you wait, the harder it gets." I'm not saying anything. I'm just saying. I had Joel at 26, and I was glad I didn't wait. A pause. Of course, every couple is different. A longer pause. I just think about it sometimes. I was 27. We had been married 8 months. I had miscarried at 7 weeks 3 months earlier. Joel and I hadn't told his family. We were still holding the loss ourselves, still in the quiet and particular grief of it, still deciding together what we wanted to share and when. I stood at that Christmas sink and dried a bowl and thought about what it would mean to tell her, to say I was pregnant and I'm not anymore, and this is not actually a conversation I can have right now. And I decided I couldn't. Not there. Not then. I said, We'll figure it out when we figure it out. She said, "Of course. That's the right attitude." She dried a pan. I dried a plate. The kitchen smelled like Christmas, and I kept my face entirely still, and I thought about nothing. I have returned to that sink in my mind many times. I have thought about the particular cruelty of the timing, which she couldn't have known about. I want to be fair to her there. She did not know what she was walking into. But also about the fact that she was talking about something that was mine, something about my body and my choices and my life, with the confident ownership of someone who had decided that her son's life was partly her jurisdiction. The comments about my family happened in the register that Diane reserved for things she found culturally interesting in the way of someone who has watched a lot of travel documentaries. My parents emigrated from Lebanon in the mid-'80s. I grew up loud and loved and fed and argued with, in a household that expressed everything through proximity and food and debate, and the particular warmth that I have always thought of as deeply, specifically home. Diane was fascinated by this. Nadia's people are very family-oriented, she told a woman at a neighborhood party once, her hand touching my arm, turning slightly toward me as though presenting an interesting local custom. Very warm. Very close. You can really feel it. The woman nodded pleasantly. I smiled. I thought, my people. I thought, as opposed to what kind of people and what is the implied contrast? And do you know you're doing this? I thought all of it and said none of it and found Joel across the room and stood close to him. And the comments about Joel himself. These were the subtlest and perhaps the most corrosive, in the way that the softest and most continuous pressure causes the deepest erosion over time. She wasn't criticizing him. She was doing the opposite. She was administering a constant, low-frequency broadcast of his perfection that operated less as praise and more as an organizing principle. Everything in the room was measured against it, and everything came up slightly smaller. Joel has always been so capable, she would say, in the same conversation where something I had done or organized or accomplished had just been mentioned. Joel is so good with people, she told me once. Directly after I had spent the better part of an hour quietly mediating a family dinner that had been sliding toward a genuine confrontation between her and Audrey about some Christmas-related grievance with a decade of history underneath it. I had redirected and softened and smoothed 4 separate times until the temperature dropped. Joel had been watching football in the den with his father. I had done the work and come back to the table, and Diane looked at me and said, "You know what I love about Joel? He's so emotionally intuitive. He always knows exactly what people need in a room." I excused myself to the bathroom. I stood in front of the mirror for 30 seconds. Then I fixed my lipstick and went back out. He hadn't been in the room. He had not been in the room for a lot of it. Here is what happened when I tried to name any of this. I want to be fair. I want to be precise. Joel did not tell me I was lying. He never said my feelings weren't real. He was not the kind of man who dismisses his partner's pain obviously and easily, in the ways that would have been simple to identify and confront. He was dismissive in a much more sophisticated, and therefore much more painful way. The way of a person who genuinely, thoroughly believes that the most loving thing he can do for the people he loves is extend the most generous possible interpretation to everything they do. The problem was not his generosity. The problem was its distribution. One person in this equation was receiving significantly more of it than the other. Our conversations about Diane almost always happened in the car on the way home. She meant well, Nadia. She doesn't have the best filter. She's awkward, you know how she gets. That generation talked about bodies differently. She went to a lot of trouble for us tonight, and later more worn, used more frequently as months became years. I love you, but you have to stop reading into everything she says. You're so sensitive about her. Too sensitive. I want to sit with that phrase for a moment, because it did significant work in our marriage over a long time, and it deserves examination. When Joel said I was too sensitive, he believed what he was saying. I want to be clear about that. He was not using the phrase as a manipulation or a weapon. He had grown up inside Diane's way of communicating, inside the particular frequency of her love and her criticism and her attention. And because he had grown up inside it, it was as invisible to him as the air in a room is invisible to the people who live in it. He had breathed this air for 30 years before I entered the house. The water he swam in was not water to him. It was simply the medium. And because I had grown up in different air, because I had come from a different house with a different mother who expressed love through feeding you extravagantly and arguing with you vigorously and hugging you until your ribs creaked, I felt the particular quality of Diane's air immediately. I felt it on my skin. And I kept trying to describe it to someone who could not feel it because he had never known anything different. He thought I was inventing a current that wasn't there. He thought the most loving thing he could do was patiently explain the water to me until I agreed to stop noticing it. What he didn't see, what I don't think he was capable of seeing, from inside it, was what that insistence cost me. Every time Joel softened a comment into something benign, I filed something away. Some small piece of my own certainty. My own knowledge of what I had experienced. I said, okay, maybe you're right, and I translated one more experience into its more comfortable version and put it somewhere I wouldn't have to look at it. Over months, over years, the cabinet got heavier and I got quieter, and I started to wonder, genuinely wonder, whether there was something wrong with me, whether I had some particular sensitivity or defensiveness about his mother that was distorting my perception, whether I was creating offense where none was intended, whether I was, as he suggested, reading in. I went to therapy. This was year 2 of our marriage. I started seeing Dr. Fiona, who is a small and precise woman in her 50s with a quality of attention that makes you feel like what you say is genuinely landing somewhere rather than being waited out. She listened to me describe Diane. She listened to me describe Joel's explanations. She listened to me describe the car rides home and the signing and the filing away. And she said, the difficulty with consistent low-grade pain is that the body adjusts. The baseline shifts. The nervous system recalibrates around the new normal. By the time you fully recognize that you're in pain, you've often been in it long enough that you've lost access to the memory of what it felt like before. A pause. And when someone you trust keeps telling you that the pain isn't real, that you're misreading it, that it's your sensitivity, not the source, that recalibration accelerates. You start to doubt your own instrument. She said it about Diane. She was also, I understand now, saying it about Joel. About what his repeated explanations were doing to my ability to trust my own knowing. There is something I have not yet told you, and I want to tell it now, not because it is the worst thing in this story. In the landscape of small and accumulated things, I am not sure it is, but because it sits at the center of my understanding of what those 3 years cost, and because I have not talked about it publicly before, and because putting it here feels like the last piece of naming something that was real and that happened, and that I am done keeping invisible. Joel and I lost a pregnancy. 7 weeks, in the late summer of year 2 of our marriage. The drive from Connecticut is an hour and a half, sometimes 2 with traffic, and I would wait until we were far enough away that the conversation felt possible. Past the last exit with his parents' town name on the sign, into the anonymous mid-highway stretch. I would say something. Carefully, not dramatically, keeping my voice measured because I had learned that anything that seemed like heightened emotion gave him a way to make the conversation about my emotional state rather than the substance. I would say, she made a comment about my weight. I would say, she called my work art projects again. I would say, when she turned to you to make that observation about me while I was sitting right there. He would sigh, not cruelly, not dismissively in the way that would have been easy to call out. Just the sigh of someone who has already prepared the response and is bracing to deliver it again. I had not known very long, 3 weeks, maybe a little more, and so the happiness of it was still very new, still in that early tender phase where you keep looking at the fact of it sideways because looking directly feels like it might break something. We had talked about children the way couples talk about things they want in the abstract future, and when the test came back positive, we held it together with a careful and private joy. We told no one. We were waiting for the 12-week threshold, the conventional point of safety. The pregnancy ended at 7 weeks. A Tuesday morning, a doctor's appointment, a kind physician named Dr. Kim, who spoke in the careful, measured voice of someone who has delivered this news many times and knows there is no good way. We went home. We sat in the apartment for the rest of the day and most of the next and held the thing between us in a particular silence. Not the silence of distance, but the silence of 2 people in the same grief, both present in it. Joel was good in those days. I want to say this clearly, because I am spending so much of this account on what he couldn't do that I want to give him credit for what he could. He was present and tender and did not minimize or rush. He cried on a Thursday afternoon in the kitchen, and I held him for a long time, and we stood there together in the ordinary kitchen of our ordinary apartment holding an extraordinary loss. That part was ours. It was real. It is one of the reasons I stayed, across all of it, because I knew the person inside the patterns I was struggling against. We didn't tell anyone for weeks. We weren't ready. We were still holding it ourselves. And then 3 months later, on a Christmas evening, I stood at Diane's kitchen sink and she said, The longer you wait, the harder it gets. I was 27 years old. I had been married 8 months. I was standing at that sink 12 weeks after losing something I had never gotten to tell her about. I dried a bowl. I thought about what it would mean to say it. To say, I was pregnant and I'm not anymore and I am still carrying that, and this conversation, right now, is not one I can have. To make myself and my grief visible in that kitchen, in that moment, in a way that would finally make the context of her comment real to her. I didn't say it. I said we'd figure it out when we figured it out. She said, of course, of course. We finished the dishes. In the car, I said something about the comment, not about the miscarriage, not ready to connect those two things aloud. And Joel said she meant well. I said, okay. We drove home. I told Dr. Fiona the following week. I told her about standing at the sink and thinking about the 7 weeks and Diane's voice and the 3 months of grief I'd been carrying in silence. Dr. Fiona said quietly, what did it feel like, not to be able to say it? I thought about it. Like being invisible, I said. Like she was in the same room with my grief and had no idea it was there. And the reason it was invisible was that I had been so careful to keep it hidden. And somehow that felt like my fault. Was it your fault? I don't know, I said. We decided not to tell anyone. I was keeping the secret I'd agreed to keep. But the result was that she got to talk about my body and my choices and my future as though she knew the first thing about what was actually happening inside my life. And I couldn't tell her. There was no one to tell her. Including Joel, she said. I looked at her for a long moment. I think I thought he'd explain it away too. She wrote something down. I looked at the window. It was raining. That was year 2. I had another year and a half of car rides left. I want to tell you about the birthday dinner because it is the moment I return to most often when I'm trying to locate the hinge, the before and after, the place where something in me went very quiet and then made a decision. My 30th birthday. Joel had asked me, 2 weeks beforehand, with the particular focus he brings to things he wants to do right. What do you want to do? This one's completely yours. I'll make it whatever you want. And I had thought about it, genuinely thought about it, not just reflexively deflecting to whatever was easiest for everyone. And I said, I want to go to that Italian restaurant downtown that we've been meaning to try for a year. Just us. Quiet, nice, just us. He said, perfect. He made the reservation. He showed me the confirmation email with a kind of small pride that I found genuinely sweet. 7 o'clock Friday night. I bought a dress, emerald green, long, with a small slit at the side, and I tried it on in the store dressing room and had that rare and good feeling of this is what I look like when I'm my best self. I bought it. I planned to wear my grandmother's earrings with it, small gold drops that had been hers, that my mother gave me, that I wore only for things that felt significant. At 5:30 on my birthday, Joel's phone rang. I was in the bathroom doing my makeup. I could hear his voice from the bedroom, the accommodation in it, the softness around the edges, the register that was not quite his regular voice. I kept doing my eyeliner. I listened without meaning to. He came to the bathroom doorway with the look I knew. The arrangement of his face that preceded a request he already understood I wouldn't want to hear. My mom called, he said. I know. I didn't put down the mascara wand. She wants to take us to dinner for your birthday. She's been planning it, she says. She got a cake. We have a reservation, Joel. I told her. But she's all ready. She's made an effort. She got the cake from that bakery. I put down the mascara wand. I turned and looked at him directly, not through the mirror. I said, it's my birthday. You asked me what I wanted. I told you. And now the question is whether your mother's hurt feelings take priority over my actual plans for my own birthday. He rubbed the back of his neck. He said, if we don't go, she'll be hurt. And something in me, very small, very tired, something that had been waiting a long time for the right moment to name itself, thought, but I'm not? I didn't say it. I understand now that I should have. I understand now that the choice not to say it was one of the most consequential choices I made across those years. The choice, again and again, to swallow the specific truth of my hurt and replace it with something easier to manage. I was protecting the peace. I was protecting Joel from having to choose. I was protecting myself from the particular exhaustion of a fight that I already knew, from years of evidence. I would not win in the way I needed to win it. I said okay. I closed my eyes briefly. I went back to my makeup. We drove to Connecticut. Diane had made roast chicken and bought a chocolate cake with my name written on it in blue frosting from the bakery on the corner of her street. She hugged me at the door and said, "Happy birthday, darling." 30, where does the time go? She held me at arm's length and looked at the green dress. I had kept the dress on. I had worn it. I was not going to change the dress, and said warmly, approvingly, with the air of someone giving a generous gift, "You look wonderful. That's a lot of dress, but you're brave, I'll give you that." She laughed. I laughed. Howard poured wine. Pete showed up an hour into the evening with a grocery store birthday card that he'd clearly bought on the way over and had signed in the car, and I felt such a surge of fondness for him that it was briefly hard to look at. We ate roast chicken on my 30th birthday, and I smiled for 4 hours straight. I thanked her for the cake. I helped with the dishes. I said it was delicious and meant it. I drove us home. In the car I said, keeping my voice careful and even, "She called the dress a lot." Joel said, "She said you looked wonderful. She said you were brave. That's a compliment." I said his name. He said she went to trouble. I said I hadn't asked her to. He said she loves you. We were home. We went inside. We went to bed. He fell asleep. I lay in the dark with my eyes open and my grandmother's earrings still in, and I thought about the Sunday mornings I spent gripping my coffee mug filing away evidence that I was fine. I thought about the 3 years of car rides. I thought about the comment delivered into the side of my neck while she was hugging me, the yellow dress that aged people, the little art projects, the someone who fits. And I hadn't heard that one yet. That was still to come. But I had all the others lined up in the dark like a very long and very quiet accounting. I thought, I have been defending myself for 3 years, and it has not helped anything. The defending had not moved anything. The explaining had not moved anything. The carefully structured articulations of exactly how things landed had not moved anything. Every single conversation in the car ended the same way, with me quieter than I'd started and Joel looking at the road with the tired, careful expression of someone who has done his best. I thought, he doesn't hear me. And then settling, then let him hear her. I did not make a plan. I want to be absolutely clear about this. I have seen stories like mine cast as calculated, as the strategic deployment of silence, as the orchestration of a revelation. That is not what this was. What this was simpler and sadder and more human than strategy. I was 30 years old, and I was tired in a way that had roots, that had grown into the structure of me, that had made itself at home in the spaces between my ribs over years. I had said everything I had to say. I had said it in every available format. In the car, in bed, in our kitchen over coffee, in text messages while we were apart, in the sessions with Dr. Fiona that I would sometimes summarize for him. I had said it carefully, and I had said it emotionally, and I had said it with specific examples, and I had said it with the exhausted simplicity of "I just need you to hear me." And he had explained it back to me every single time. So I thought, asterisk okay. If my words can't reach him, maybe hers can asterisk. Not with confidence. Not with any particular plan for what reaching him would look like. Just with the stripped-back logic of someone who has run out of other options and arrived at the only thing left. Stop. Stop translating. Stop contextualizing. Stop offering the interpretive framework that had been my contribution to every conversation about his mother. Stop saying, but what she actually meant, and but the way that landed was, and but when she said that it felt like. Stop doing the labor of making Diane legible to someone who loved her too much to read her himself. Just stop providing that service and see what happens when it's gone. Becca, my best friend, the person who has known me since we were 19 years old and randomly assigned as college roommates and who loves me enough to not lie to me, went quiet for a long moment when I told her. Then she said, "You know what's going to happen. Tell me." He's going to hear it in her voice, without your translation, and it's going to hurt him. And then, if he is who I think he might be, he's going to come to you. And if he doesn't, she didn't answer right away. When she did, then you'll know something important about what comes next. I didn't sleep well for several nights after that, but I stayed quiet. I need to tell you about Becca because she matters to this story and she deserves her moment in it. We have been friends since a random roommate assignment our freshman year of college. On paper, we should not have worked. She is organized and I am constitutionally chaotic. She is direct in the way that sometimes takes your breath away, and I was, in those years, deeply conflict avoidant. She is Black and grew up in Atlanta, and I grew up in a Lebanese-American household in New Jersey, and we arrived at that first dorm room from such different directions that the miracle was not that we became close. It was that we became close as fast as we did. We were sitting on our respective twin beds at 2 a.m. on our third night as roommates eating terrible dining hall food and talking about our mothers, and by 4 o'clock we had covered enough ground to understand that we were going to be in each other's lives for a very long time. She was right about Diane from the beginning. She said, within a week of my telling her about the yellow dress comment, "That woman is going to be a problem." I laughed and told her she was jumping to conclusions. Becca said, with the serenity of someone who is already at the destination while you're still arguing about directions, "I am not jumping to anything. I am standing perfectly still watching a conclusion walk toward me at a reasonable speed." She was right. She was always right. She just had to wait for me to catch up. Over the years of my marriage, she had listened to more car ride summaries than I can count. She had sat with me through the miscarriage. She had been on the phone with me the night after my 30th birthday, listening to me describe roast chicken and blue frosting and 4 hours of smiling. And she had not said "I told you so," which is one of the great acts of friendship I have ever received. When I told her my plan, my non-plan, my exhausted silence, she didn't celebrate it. She didn't say good finally. She just said, "I'll be here when it's over, whatever over looks like. And then, call me when something happens." The first month of not defending myself was harder than I expected, and not for the reason I expected. I had thought the difficulty would be watching comments land without responding to them, that the effort would be the restraint of staying quiet when I wanted to speak. And it was that, yes. But the deeper difficulty was something else. The particular discomfort of receiving something and not managing it. For 3 years, I had been managing the atmosphere at every family gathering. I had been the absorber, the thing that took the impact before it could travel further, that translated and softened and redirected so that everyone could remain comfortable. Stopping that was not just silence. It was the withdrawal of an ongoing labor, and the withdrawal was felt. We went to Sunday dinner 3 weeks after my birthday. I wore a plain dark sweater. No jewelry. I understood, putting on the plain sweater, that I had been dressing this way before visits for a long time already, presenting fewer surfaces, giving her less to work with, and that I had been doing it unconsciously, that this was another thing I had normalized, and I felt something about that, a quiet and resigned kind of sadness, before I put the thought away and got in the car. Diane said at dinner, "Have you two thought any more about the house thing?" This was the Connecticut suggestion. Joel said, still thinking about it. She said, "It would be so nice to have you nearby. Especially when you have children, you want family around." The table went briefly quiet. Joel glanced at me. "Old me, we haven't made any decisions about that yet." Gently. Calibrated. Present. I said nothing. I took some bread. Diane looked at me. "Nadia, you're quiet tonight. Everything okay?" "I'm fine," I said. "Just tired. You work too hard." She said it with a slight drop in her voice, and with a small turn toward Joel as she said it, making the observation about me to him rather than to me. Joel nodded. "She does," he said, and went back to his food. I watched his face. He had not heard it. Not yet. There was a Thanksgiving in that second month of silence that I want to tell you about because I have never described it to anyone, and it contains something important. It was a large gathering. Diane and Howard, Pete and his girlfriend Wendy, Audrey who had flown in from Portland, and a couple of Diane and Howard's friends who came every year. A retired physician named Dr. Partridge and his wife Lorraine, who were pleasant and loud and had a habit of telling the same stories every year with the same volume and the same punchlines. The kind of people who are holiday fixtures, who have accumulated a comfortable permanence in a family's calendar. The day was long and plentiful, and Diane was in her element. She was genuinely an excellent host. I want to be fair about that. She took real pleasure in a table well set and a meal well made. And there was something about Thanksgiving specifically that brought out the best of that quality in her. The food was good. The table was beautiful. She had put thought into every detail. I sat at that table for 5 hours, and I did something I had never done before. I watched it the way I would have watched a film. Without my usual ongoing management of the atmosphere, without my translation work, without the ongoing calibration that had been the background hum of every family gathering for 3 years. I just watched. And what I saw was this. Diane asked Wendy, Pete's girlfriend, the medical student, 6 questions over the course of the meal. 6 specific, interested, follow-up questions about her program, her specialty, what she found hard, what she loved, what her family thought about her choosing medicine. She remembered something Wendy had mentioned at a previous gathering and referenced it with the particular warmth of someone who had been paying attention. Wendy lit up. You could watch her light up in real time, unfolding slightly under the warmth of being seen. Diane asked me one question. She asked me to pass the cranberry sauce. I'm not being entirely fair. She also said my hair looked nice, which was not a question but was an observation directed at me. So technically it was more than one interaction. But I sat there and I counted, not to build a case, just because I had stopped doing other things and counting was what was available, and the count was what it was. Audrey caught my eye across the table at one point. Just briefly. The smallest possible smile, barely a smile at all. More like the acknowledgement of a shared understanding that did not need to be made explicit. I looked back at her and gave nothing in return, just held her gaze for a moment, and something passed between us that felt like, I see you seeing it. After dinner in the kitchen, Audrey stood beside me while we were putting leftovers away and said, very quietly, without looking at me, "How are you doing, really?" "I'm fine," I said. She handed me a container. "You don't have to be fine with me." "I know." I put the container in the refrigerator. "I'm managing." "That's not fine," she said. "That's managing." She said it without judgment, just with the accuracy of someone who has been doing the same thing for 20 years and knows the difference in texture between the two states. I looked at her for a moment and she looked back and she said, "I'm sorry Joel doesn't see it yet. For what it's worth, I think he will. I always thought he would eventually. He's not a bad person. He's just very, very inside it." She went back to the leftovers. I went back to the leftovers. Diane came into the kitchen and remarked that we'd used too much butter in the mashed potatoes this year, but it was fine. It was just for one day. And then she went back out. I stood at the kitchen counter and thought about the 6 questions. About Wendy lighting up. About the cranberry sauce. I thought, I've been trying to get someone to see this for 3 years by describing it. Describing a thing to someone who cannot see it does not make it visible. But standing quietly in the room while they look is a different action entirely. I drove home that night with a sense of something crystallizing. Not resolution exactly. More like the feeling of having finally located the coordinates of something I'd been trying to find in the dark. The second month was when I first noticed something shifting in Joel. Subtle, slow, the way real changes always are. You don't see it happen, you look up and notice the room has a different quality than it had before. He was watching me at dinners with an expression I didn't fully recognize. Not suspicious, not worried, just attentive in a slightly different way. Alert to an absence he was beginning to locate but not yet name. At a restaurant dinner in November, Diane talked about someone's adult daughter who had made questionable choices, talked about a neighbor's renovation that she found vulgar, talked about Joel's childhood with a fond narrative sweep. And then she turned to Joel about the Hartford suggestion again and ended with, "And Nadia, you could do your work from anywhere, couldn't you? Your projects." She said it warmly, in the warm light of a nice restaurant, over good wine. I said, I took a sip of water. Joel looked at me. Something moved through his expression, a brief furrow, a flicker. He turned back to his mother and said, "Sure, something to think about," and the conversation moved on. But he was still looking at me slightly, in the peripheral way of someone tracking a thing they're not sure of yet. In bed that night, quiet. "You were quiet at dinner." "I'm tired. You usually say something about the Hartford thing." I didn't have anything to say. A long silence. I could feel him not sleeping, the particular quality of wakefulness that is also thinking, also processing, also turning something over in the dark. Good, I thought. Turn it over. Look at it from all the angles I've been showing you for 3 years. The third month contained the Tuesday in December that changed everything. Joel worked from home that day. His mother called at 3 in the afternoon. I was in my studio, a room I have made mine over years, with prints on the walls and a particular lamp I love and the specific quality of productive quiet that I associate with my best work. And my door was half open, and I heard the accommodation in his voice from down the hall, the mother voice, the register that belonged to her. I kept working. I didn't pay particular attention. The call lasted 45 minutes. He came to my studio doorway and stood in it for a moment before speaking. I looked up. His face had a quality I had not seen before. Not quite bewilderment, not quite grief, something in between, something at the beginning of a larger understanding still arriving. He said, "My mom called." I heard. He came in and sat in the chair by the window. He sat down heavily, the way you sit when your body has been deciding to do it for longer than your mind has. "She asked me," he said, slowly and carefully, like a man reading a document he needs to get exactly right, "if I thought you seemed distant lately." I set down what I was doing. I waited. I told her you seemed fine. And she said, he stopped. She said, "Joel, I'm going to say this because I love you and I want you to be happy. I wonder sometimes if Nadia is really invested in this family. In us. Because she's never fully present when we're together. There's always this coolness about her. And I know some people just aren't warm, and that's fine, but I want to make sure you're actually happy." The room was quiet. My cursor blinked on the screen. I said, "Mom, Nadia has always been gracious with you." And she said, he stopped again, pressed his mouth together, breathed. She said, "Has she though? Because I always feel like she's barely tolerating us. Like she's enduring the visits. Honestly, Joel, I've never really felt like she wanted to be part of this family." I heard each sentence arriving. I received them without speaking. And then, he said quieter, she said, "I just hope you have a partner who really appreciates you, sweetheart. Who is genuinely happy here. You deserve someone who fits. Someone who fits." He said it, and then he stopped. And I watched what happened on his face. The thing I had been waiting for, had given up on, had stopped expecting. I watched it arrive. The sentence landed in him without my translation, without my contextualizing, without my 3 years of carefully explaining what each comment meant and how it landed. It landed bare and exact, in her voice, and he felt the shape of it. Someone who fits. He sat in the chair by the window for a long moment. He sat the way people sit after they've been standing for too long and something has finally given way. He said quietly, "Is that what it's been like?" And I said, for the first time in 3 years, without managing how it might land, without softening it, without apologizing in advance for having it, "Yes, that's what it's been like." We talked for 3 hours. I want to be honest about the texture of those 3 hours because there is a version of this kind of story in which the revelation is clean, in which understanding arrives and everything repairs itself swiftly, and the conversation has a beginning and a middle and a resolution, the way good conversations in movies do. That is not what 3 hours of this looked like. Joel cried. I wasn't expecting it. He is not someone who cries easily, and when it happened I didn't know quite what to do with myself. I was still full of my own years of accumulated grief, still in the process of receiving what he'd said rather than finished with it, and watching his hurt arrive was complicated for me in a way I could not immediately sort. It was not triumphant to see. It was just very human and very sad. I didn't cry. Not then. I had cried across those 3 years in private places, showers and cars and the bathroom at his parents' house with the door locked and the fan on. And I think I had simply used up my available supply for that particular evening. What I had instead was a kind of clarity. A great, still clarity. He asked me to tell him everything. Specifically, the actual incidents. So I went back to the beginning. The yellow dress in July, the comment delivered into my neck. The years of comments about my appearance. The little art projects. The birthday dinner. When I got to the birthday dinner, I watched him go completely still. His face did something particular, and he didn't move for a moment, and then he said very quietly, "I shouldn't have done that." No qualification. No explanation of his mother's good intentions. Just, I shouldn't have done that. I told him about the Christmas kitchen. About standing at that sink 8 months into our marriage, holding a bowl, hearing her talk about not waiting, while I was 3 months out from a loss she didn't know about. His face when I said this was something I will not try to describe. I told him about every car ride home, about the sighing, about the patient explanations, about the slow accumulation of being told, by the person I trusted most, that my perception of my own experience was incorrect. I told him what it had cost me, not dramatically, not as an accusation, but plainly, the way you describe a place you've been to that someone else has never seen. He didn't defend her. Not once, not one time across 3 hours. He listened with the focused and uncomfortable attention of someone receiving information about themselves as much as about anyone else. Near the end, he said, "I made you feel alone in this." Yes, every time I explained her, I was actually telling you that your experience wasn't real. Yes, a pause. I want to say I didn't know. But I think the more honest thing is that I didn't let myself know. Because knowing would have required me to act. To tell her that she couldn't talk to you that way. To choose you in a way she could feel, in a way that might cost something. He looked at the floor for a moment. I kept thinking if I just maintained the peace between you two, if I kept smoothing things over, eventually you'd both just settle into it. I thought management was the same as care. I said, "Joel, who do you think was doing the managing?" He looked at me. It was me. Every visit. Every comment. Every dinner. I was the one swallowing it and redirecting and keeping the temperature down and smiling until my face ached. And I kept coming to you and saying, I just need you to hear me. That's all I was asking for. Not to go to war with your mother. Not to choose sides. Just to hear me and believe that what I was telling you was real. He nodded. Not the nod that ends a conversation. The nod of someone who has placed the last piece of something that has been incomplete for a long time. He called Audrey the next day. He didn't tell me he was going to. He just did it, went somewhere private, called her, talked for nearly an hour, and then came and found me and told me what she said, which was years of knowledge in compressed form. Yes, their mother did this. Yes, she had always done this. Yes, Audrey had spent her mid-20s learning the cost of not having a position on it, and then slowly finding her way to a sustainable distance. She loves you, Joel, Audrey apparently said. She genuinely does. But she loves you in a way that requires everyone around you to be a little smaller, to be a little less, so that you stay in the position she needs you in. I think she's been doing it my whole life. I don't think she knows she does it. Joel sat at our kitchen table and said that sentence back to me. Loves you in a way that requires everyone around you to be a little smaller. He said it slowly, rotating it, examining it from different angles in the morning light. He called his mother 2 days later. I was in my studio. I could hear the register of his voice, but not the words. It was not the soft, accommodating voice. It was his actual voice, the one he used in the rest of his life, with people he had no need to manage. 25 minutes. Afterward, he came to me, pale and tired in the way of someone who has done something that needed doing. I told her that some of the things she says to you are unkind, he said. I gave her specific examples. I told her I should have said so long ago, and I was sorry that I hadn't. He looked at me. I told her about the birthday dinner. I said that should never have happened, and that was on me, and that I was sorry. A breath. She cried. She said she didn't know. She said she loves you. She asked if you hated her. I don't hate her. I told her that. I also told her that I needed it to be different going forward. That it couldn't just be, I didn't mean to. That I needed her to actually think about how she speaks to you. He crossed the room and sat beside me and took my hand in both of his. He said, I'm sorry. I let you carry something alone that you should not have had to carry. And every time I told you that you were being too sensitive, I was telling you not to know what you knew. I'm sorry. There is something about being finally heard by the person whose hearing you have most needed. It is not triumph. It is not the clean, uncomplicated relief of a problem solved. It is something older and more tender and more mixed than either of those things. It has gratitude in it and grief. The grief of all the time before this, all the car rides, all the Sunday mornings, and love, the complicated ongoing love of two people who have hurt each other and are choosing still to stay and do the work. I held his hands and I cried. All the tears that hadn't been available on the night, everything cracked open. They came then. I cried for a long time and he held my hands and neither of us said anything. And that was exactly right. I want to tell you about the months after because the revelation is not the ending. The revelation is only where the actual work begins. It has been 5 months now. It is April. The light is different, softer, more provisional, the early uncertain light of a season that is still deciding what it wants to be. I am different too, in ways I am still learning to name. Joel went back to therapy. He'd done a few sessions years ago and stopped, and he went back now with a different quality of intention. The intention of someone who has understood that there is something structural to examine rather than just a series of incidents to process. He is working through what it means to have been raised in a family where his mother's needs organized everything. What it means to have been the beloved oldest child around whom a certain dynamic crystallized. What it means to have been so fully inside a particular water that you couldn't see the water at all. He talks to me about it. Not performing self-awareness. Not doing the thing where articulating personal insight substitutes for changing personal behavior, but actually talking in the honest and unfinished way of someone mid-process. Some nights we lie in the dark and he says something like, I think I understood on some level that she wasn't entirely kind to you. And I think I let myself not examine that because examining it meant I'd have to do something about it, and doing something about it meant disappointing her. And I had never, in 35 years, let myself disappoint her in a way she could feel. And then we talk about it. We talk about it the way people talk when they are genuinely trying to find something out, rather than trying to convince each other of something they've already decided. He still loves his mother. I would not ask him not to. She is not a monster. She is a woman with a particular complicated relationship to love and loss of control in her son, and she has caused harm that she may or may not fully understand. And she is also a person who bought a birthday cake with blue frosting and genuinely meant something by it. The whole truth is complicated, and I am learning to hold all of it without flattening it in the direction of either cruelty or false generosity. When we see her now, still, though differently, with more intentional spacing and less obligation-driven frequency, Joel is present in a way he wasn't before. Alert, engaged, not aggressive, not cold, not performing anything. Just there. A few weeks ago, Diane reflexively called my work, your projects. The phrase came out of old habit thoughtlessly, and Joel said simply, without making a production of it, Nadia's been having a great year. She just renewed her biggest client. A small sentence. Also everything. Diane paused, looked at me, said with something in her voice that may have been effort and may have been genuine or may have been both at once. Oh, Nadia, that's wonderful. I'm really glad. I looked at her face when she said it. I decided I didn't need to read all the way to the bottom of it. I decided to take the surface and leave the rest. Thank you, I said. I'm proud of it. And I was. And I let myself be, without reaching for evidence that I deserved to be. There is a Sunday in March that I want to tell you about. 6 weeks ago. This is my new image to hold. My replacement for all those Sunday mornings I spent gripping my coffee cup filing away proof that I was fine. We were driving to Connecticut. Gray, overcast, that flat pre-spring light that makes the world look like it's holding its breath. The trees still bare, the highway familiar, the 45-minute drive that I have taken so many times that I could do it without looking at the signs. Joel said, "Are you okay about today?" I thought about it. "Yeah," I said. "I think so. If anything happens that bothers you, I'll tell you." I paused. "And I know you'll hear me." He reached over and took my hand. He held it for a while without saying anything. Then, quietly, without looking away from the road, "I'm still sorry about before. I know I've said it. I just keep needing you to know that I know." I turned and looked at him. His jaw was set the way it gets when he's trying to say something true and wanting to get it right. I felt something warm and real move through me. Not the relief of crisis resolved, but the warmer and quieter thing, the feeling of being genuinely accompanied. "I know," I said. "I really do." He tightened his hand on mine. We drove the rest of the way in a quiet that felt nothing like the silences we used to move through. This quiet was not full of things being deliberately unsaid. This quiet was the ordinary quiet of two people who know they can speak whenever they need to, and are choosing, for now, simply to be. These are the things I have learned, and I am going to say them as plainly as I can, because I think they might matter to someone. I learned that too sensitive is a description given by people who benefit from you not noticing things. Real sensitivity, the attentive, informed kind, is a form of intelligence. It is your nervous system doing exactly what it is supposed to do, gathering information, registering what is actually happening, building a picture of your environment with all available data. When someone tells you that you are too sensitive, they are asking you to put down the data and walk away from it. And when that someone is the person you trust most, the person you've built your life alongside, the instruction goes into you in ways that other instructions don't. You start to mistrust your own instrument. I learned that love is sometimes selective attention, and that the people who love us most are not always capable of witnessing the ways we are being harmed. Not because they are bad people, but because their love has organized their perception around a particular shape, and anything that doesn't fit that shape doesn't fully register. Joel loved his mother, and he loved me, and his love for her had been doing its organizing work for 35 years before I came along. I couldn't change what his love had built. I could only stop providing the labor that let him avoid seeing it. I learned that silence, in the right conditions, is not the same as surrender. The silence of withdrawal, of taking back the energy and labor I had been spending to keep a particular dynamic comfortable, was the most instructive thing I did across those 3 years. Not as punishment, not as strategy, as exhaustion, as the simple cessation of a labor I no longer had the resources to keep performing. When I stopped translating, when I stopped absorbing, when I stopped being the thing that caught the impact before it could travel, what was left was the thing itself, unmediated, and Joel felt its actual shape for the first time. I learned that accountability and apology are not the same thing. Diane was sorry I had felt hurt. Joel was sorry he hadn't listened, hadn't stood with me, hadn't done for me what I needed him to do. Those are different apologies, and they do different work, and I needed to know the difference. I learned that I love my husband more clearly now than I did a year ago. Not more than before, exactly, but more clearly. I can see him better, see what he is when confronted with something hard, see what he chose when the choice became visible. He could have found one more explanation. He chose not to. He went quiet, and then he made the call, and then he came to me and said, "Tell me everything." And he listened all the way through. Those are not small things. Those are maybe the whole of what we are asking for when we choose a person. To be listened to all the way through, without being handed our own experience back in a gentler form. I learned, finally, the loneliness of not being seen by the person who is supposed to see you as a particular and very quiet grief. It doesn't announce itself. It doesn't make scenes. It accumulates in the space between conversations, in the long drives home, in the Sunday mornings when you hold a mug of coffee and file the ordinary goodness away as evidence that you are fine. And the undoing of that loneliness, the actual moment of being genuinely seen, is not loud either. It does not arrive with ceremony. It comes in a car on a gray morning in March, a hand on yours, a voice saying, "I want you to know that I know." It comes in a room where someone says your name with uncomplicated pride, unrehearsed, because they mean it. It comes in the slow, unspectacular, irreplaceable accumulation of being fully known. I'm going to end here because I've said what I needed to say, and I am aware that I am a person with a life to get back to. With a studio that needs new shelving, and a lamp I've been meaning to replace, and a client project I'm genuinely excited about, and a husband who is, right now, in the kitchen making breakfast in the particular loud and cheerful way he makes breakfast on Saturday mornings. I can hear him from here. He is humming something. Off-key and comfortable and private. The sound of a person who thinks nobody is listening. I'm listening. I'm really, genuinely listening. And what I hear, today, is fine. More than fine. Asterisk if you read all of this, thank you. I didn't know when I started writing how long it would be. I just knew it needed to be said somewhere, fully, without editing down to fit into someone else's comfort. Asterisk. Asterisk to anyone in the middle of the filing cabinet, the Sunday mornings, the car rides home. You are not too sensitive. You are measuring something that is actually there. Your data is real. Asterisk. Nadia. Top comment, /velvet_Thursday, 4.7K upvotes. I read every word of this. Every single one. She loves you in a way that requires everyone around you to be a little smaller, is the most precise description of a particular kind of person I have ever read. I've been trying to describe that exact phenomenon for 20 years. Thank you for having the language. Opie reply. Audrey said it like she'd arrived at it through years of work and had no drama left about it. Just the plain, settled fact of it. It broke my heart and explained 2 decades of a family in 11 words. She is extraordinary. I called her after everything happened and she said, "I know. I've been waiting for him to see it." She had been waiting longer than I had. /restless_pragmatist ***, 3.4K upvotes. The detail about the dress. You wore it. You kept the emerald dress on, and you drove to Connecticut, and you wore it to the dinner that was supposed to be yours. And she still said it was a lot, while you were sitting at her table instead of the restaurant you'd wanted. I cannot describe what that did to me to read. Opie reply. I kept the dress on because I refused to let her take the dress too. That's the only decision I made that night that felt fully like mine. And yes, she commented on it anyway. That is exactly what it was like. /A_house_with_light, 2.9K upvotes. What happened with your actual birthday? Did Joel do anything? Opie reply. He took me to the Italian restaurant. About 3 weeks after the conversation in December. He didn't tell me where we were going, just said dress up. And we pulled up to the place I'd wanted, and he'd called ahead and asked for a nice table and arranged a small dessert at the end, which the waiter brought out with a single candle. He said, "Happy birthday, late, and I'm sorry." I cried at the table. The waiter was wonderfully discreet about the whole thing. The pasta was genuinely excellent. It was, improbably and belatedly, a very good birthday. /groundwork_11, 2.1K upvotes. You were maintaining a relationship between 2 other people that neither of those people was maintaining themselves. That is the sentence that got me. You were keeping Joel comfortable about his mother and keeping Diane comfortable at every table, and literally no one was doing any of that for you. You were the infrastructure, and nobody saw the infrastructure until it stopped. Opie reply, infrastructure. That is exactly the word. You don't think about the infrastructure until the lights go out. /saffron_ordinary, 1.8k upvotes. The cost of fighting was always higher than the cost of going. I have been performing this calculation in my own life, and I have been doing it for so long that it feels like just how things are. I didn't know other people knew about this math. Opie reply, everyone who has ever been the peacekeeper in a relationship knows this math. The tragedy is that we get so good at it that it starts to feel like just the way things are, like a fact of reality, rather than a choice we keep making under pressure. I hope you get to put the calculator down. I really do. You / perennial_Northside, 1.6k upvotes. How are you doing? Not the situation. Just you, Nadia. Opie reply, this is the right question. I'm okay. Actually okay, not proof gathering okay. Most days I'm more than that. I still catch myself sometimes, pre-adjusting before visits, bracing for comments that may not come, doing the old math reflexively before I remember that I don't have to do it alone anymore. The habits of self-protection are slower to unlearn than the original wounds were to create. I started writing again. I kept a journal through a lot of those years and stopped somewhere in year 2 because writing things down felt like assembling a case no one was going to believe. I've started again. It helps. It helped to write this. I'm redoing my studio. New shelves, a better lamp. I rearranged the desk so I face the window now. It's a small thing and it is everything. It's mine. I had a conversation with my mother last month, my actual mother, who has always understood something was wrong without knowing the specifics. And I told her some of it. She said to me in Arabic, something that translates roughly to, * your knowing was never wrong. You were always right about what you felt. * I cried in a way that I hadn't expected, the kind of crying that is just release, the pressure finally getting out. I'm okay. I'm genuinely okay. And I've stopped needing the okay to mean anything other than what it means. The temperature of today. A current fact. Not proof. Just real. * post locked at Opie's request. * thank you. All of you. Enough now. I have a breakfast to get to and a life that is, I'm starting to fully believe, a good one. *